Hey, welcome to the Spiritual Underground podcast. This is Dan coming to you from my wood shop in the backyard of DTM Enterprises. Hey, just a little commercial on the DTMWW.net. Go out there and see the things I'm making. Also got some handyman stuff going on here locally. So if you're in the Louisville metro area, 502-292-7444. And we can hook you up on lots of handyman type of stuff, man. You got a honey-do list? Holler at me. Got a honey-do list and don't have no honey to do it? I'm your guy. Been having a blast doing that. Actually, walking away with smiles on people's faces, man. Their stuff is fixed. The Go Out 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cohn at Amazon. Please go out there and take a look at that, man. It's the 12 steps for everybody. It's a master's level course of the 12 steps, optimized way of doing that work. Another feather in your cap and another way to grow and continue to increase the quality of your life in whatever you happen to be recovering from. I'm just going to sit around and talk about some things today. There's a couple things on my heart. A couple things been going on, and spend some time talking to y'all. So a week from today, I'll turn 50 years old. That's a pretty decent milestone. I'd say I'd never considered making it, but I didn't consider not making it. It just seems odd that, man, boom, there you are. But I look around at my other 50-year-old friends, and they don't look old anymore. But, man, I remember a long time ago looking forward, 50 looked like an old person. I feel pretty good today. Don't feel 50 at any level. Man, excuse me. What else is going on? Oh, I'll tell you along those lines. So Monday morning we'll take off and go to Vermont for 5 days. I got some cool stuff going on there. Robin's taking me for a little trip on my 50th birthday. Pampered trip. That's going to be a blast. Looking really forward to that. And then coming home on Saturday, coming home Friday and then Saturday on my actual birthday. With a half a dozen of my best friends, going out to eat and going to see Buddy Guy and Kenny Wayne Shepherd at Outdoor Theater here in Louisville, amphitheater. So that's going to be cool. Heck of a next few days going on. I got a couple brothers coming over tomorrow too to do podcasts. Mark and Marshall, our actual sponsor and sponsee. Marshall just crossed over 1 year sobriety like a week ago, and so I like to get that fresh recovery. That is get that in here on the microphone, and Mark has been sponsoring him, and Marshall's just on fire. So we're going to they're both coming up from about an hour away, and we're going to, man, I cannot get comfortable in the chair I'm in. We are going to do a double header, have each of them tell their stories, and because it's going to be a cool Sunday also. So, and hell, last night, Brandon and I, y'all seen his story on here, Juice Man. He came down to the cabin. Him and I drove down the cabin Friday night, and he dropped his fifth step. I hate that. I said drop it. I don't like dropping. I don't like the words drop it when it's talking to a step. I don't know why. It's personal pet peeve. No big deal. But so we did that. He come down, built a fire, cooked up some steaks, and some asparagus, and some mushrooms. Had a big meal, freaking awesome. And sit down and got free of some stuff. So that is cool. And Brandon's been sober for quite some time, and 16 years, I believe. And so his fifth step's a little different than what maybe a person that's coming down the pike that's new and first time through the steps. There's quite a bit of difference in the two. It's kind of a new word for me, and a big honor for me too to have him ask me to take him through the steps. And here I am, 4 years and 7.5 months or something, and he's 16. So that's what we do in our lineage. We teach, we learn from one another. We don't have any barriers to, or any egos attached, or we try not to. On asking people to sponsor you or asking people to take you through the steps, got more or less time than you. So why that? What the hell's that matter? It's like age. What's age mean? They're a little younger than me. Got somebody texting me. Actually, it's Robin. Should probably not reply. Should probably put that down. So we lost a guy this week too, man. I'll swing around and do different things. One of our friends lost his brother, true brother, and blood brother, and to this disease, and they laid him to rest today, and it's just a common occurrence, man. I said in a little YouTube video the other day, and man, I don't mean this to be disrespectful at all, because what I want is people to freaking recover and survive and not go off and end up dead over this stuff. He just couldn't come in and be one of us. And you see that happen quite often. And I think that's part of the disease. It's one of the things that keeps us separate. It's the thing we talk about being terminally unique, that I'm not like you guys. I shared this the other day, and I don't know if this makes any sense or not, but it's like if you're on the Cubs baseball team and you're going to come sit in the dugout and you want to play with them, but you're going to wear a Phillies uniform. They're not going to be real happy about you being on the team. You're not really part of the team. You're setting yourself as a separate entity. You're putting yourself over to the side. And I know we all are unique and unique people, that kind of thing. But this recovery thing doesn't tend to seem to work that way. If you want to stand out on the perimeter, on the outside looking in, you don't recover. And that's my experience. That's what I've been seeing. And they die. So then I get a phone call today from a guy out of the blue. He friended me on Facebook, and then he calls me today. He texted me and says he's in a bad spot. And I said, do we need to talk? And he said, yeah. So he sent me his phone number, and I called him, and that story come up, and he just flat out told me he's not ready to stop drinking. And the fact of the matter is, I can't really help you, because I'm not going to sit. I don't go chasing you down. I don't go try to wrestle you into a rehab joint. If you called me and wanted to ride, I probably would, but I'm not going to come and try to get you to do that. And I was glad that he told me, he was honest with me about that he did not want to quit. And I was honest to him about, I don't really spend a lot of time with people who are not in the solution. So when he is in the solution, and the way I look at that is that I think you prop people up. It's kind of an enabling thing where you prop somebody up, where if I get out, they can suck the serenity out of me in a couple different ways. It gets bled over into them because they'll talk to me and get some of my juice. I end up discharging some juice. They walk away feeling better. I walk away feeling worse. And if I would just get out of the way and let them fall over and maybe give them a chance to hit a bottom. That's the same thing I was talking about families have that opportunity to give people consequences. And they won't. And so in these ways, when somebody calls me and asks for help, if they're not wanting help really, I'm backing off. I'm backing away, and I'm not going to be the one that props them up and holds them upright until, they actually get ready. And man, I told him I love him. If he's sober, he can call me. I'll talk to him. I don't talk to drunks. I'm not going to spend any time on the telephone with somebody that's drunk unless they're hitting that bottom and they're ready to change. We're not going to have her sit around and have a drunk conversation. I'm not doing that. Anyway, I told him the story of our friend who died, and this guy started crying. So I know that I hit him at a level that touched him. My sponsors told me that tears are the gold standard for all this work. So when he did that, and we broke it off and said goodbye, told him to call me, and I'd help him how I could. It's interesting how those things come around, and he had met me at a meeting. I barely remember him. I looked him up on Facebook. I saw his picture, so I do remember him. I do really good with names and faces and stuff, but I didn't really, I barely met him. So that's that. Got some woodworking projects going. Taking a little break. on the handyman thing so I can take this vacation. Excited about that. What else is going on? I started thinking about some things that as people tell their stories and I get a chance to speak. And we had a TSSR meeting the other night. We were talking about safe and tight containers, and Frank had brought that language to me, and it means a lot to me today about that having a safe place to talk. And I get myself in some positions where I can't, I don't feel safe. And one of the reasons is because the container is not tight. I'm not sure that what I say won't go other places. And, some things happened last week before the TSSR meeting, and there were some people sitting in the meeting, and they were close to other people and that I know. And they were close to the people that were in my head and what I would be sharing about. And I didn't feel safe sharing that night, and that's okay, and that's actually another blessing, is that I knew to keep my mouth shut. Fact of the matter is I probably wasn't exactly right because of, but I pause when I'm doubtful too, not just when I'm agitated. So I didn't share and didn't let that stuff out because the container didn't seem safe and it didn't seem tight. And that's something that most of my recovery circles give me, and that's like what we do with that fifth step last night. That is a safe and tight container. We're down there at my cabin. Nobody's overhearing us for sure. We're certainly in a safe atmosphere, and we're not. And I give my guy ironclad guarantee that I am not going to let out what he tells me in someplace else. So I'm going to pause this thing for just a second because I'm looking at the audio and something doesn't seem right. Hang on a second. All right, I'm back. I didn't do something I normally do, and I don't know that it had any negative effect whatsoever. It didn't seem to, but it had me scared. I thought, man, I've done some time here of podcast recording, and it may not have been recorded. So it's like safe and tight containers is an important thing, and we do it in like our little group. We got this group me, and we in there. It's a thing where along the same lines, and to further that statement, the safe and safe and sharing deeply with one another requires a safe and tight container that works best when all participants participate equally and consistently. So if people are not anteing up their stuff, and that's kind of the thing about a fifth step last night, we exchange fifth steps. We don't, a guy doesn't, that's why I don't like that dropped my fifth step. I'm exchanging a fifth step with a guy. He's telling me some things about his life, some stuff that he's, sensitive things, and sometimes take it to the grave kind of stuff that you're allowing somebody else in and telling. And I do the same thing and share back to my stuff too. So then we end up with this that exchange that happens where we've both participated, we've both anteed up, we've both put some, we both have some skin in the game, and that's the way that stuff works best. So we have some people in our group and stuff that do not participate, and it gets to be a little sticky, and you end up in a position where you're like, well, man, and so I contact them and get with them on that, and it just doesn't work for me. If you're not, you don't get to just, this isn't Facebook where you just get to lurk and read the news, or this is a participatory endeavor, these groups that I'm in. Feel the same thing about home groups and things like that too. If you're just, I don't know, it's that thing where I say, thank you for allowing me to participate in my recovery. I must participate in my recovery. I have to take an active role in that. And one of those things is anteing up and being part of the group and putting on the damn Cubs uniform and sitting on it, and saying I am one too. Whatever you guys are, I am one too. I'm not standing out separate from y'all. And I'm going to put my stuff on the table and empty out my pockets and show you what I have. And I expect you to do the same. And I know that's not, that ain't for everybody, but that's for me and that's for my tribe. That's what we do. We get our shit out on the table and share it. So enough of that. I got to thinking about some things in some different places that, I keep on seeing people with ankle bracelets on. I know a bunch of people that have ankle bracelets on right now. And I wore one for 9 months. It was supposed to be a year, but I ended up getting off of it in 9 months, and I actually got off of it, and they took it off of me. I think it was, if I'm remembering the date right, it's November the 4th of 2015, and I had my car packed and ready to go deer hunting, and had gotten permission from Angel Janine down at the community corrections office to do that. And off I went for a couple weeks down to the cabin. And man, if you're on home incarceration for 9 months and get broke free like that, there's a level of freedom in that's beyond. Well, it's beyond what most people. I guess it's kind of like getting out of jail, or getting out of prison. But it was fantastic, and that's something I've been doing every year now. Is about that time is going and taking my little sabbatical and going down to the cabin. But I got to thinking about I can almost do a whole talk on just my home incarceration period. The things that happened, I didn't know when I went to court that day. One of the things they do is they take you back into the back of the room and you sign you read the papers and sign them and everything, and you come back out to the front of the courtroom and do it officially on record, where the judge asks you all the questions and you answer them out loud, and the court reporters taking all the whatever they do, doing what they do. And I thought that was going to be like they'd slam a gavel and come out there and clamp a bracelet around my ankle, but they didn't. And I was told to report at community corrections in a week or whatever it was. It was a little bit down the road. And so then I got to thinking about that, and that's I'm almost better if you don't let me have time to think. But I did, and I got some information, talked to my sponsor about it, about what should I do. One of the things he had me do was made a list of everything I was doing. I was going to a meeting every day. On Tuesdays I was going to 2. And so I made a list of all those locations, where they were at. I had a number of places where I was taking my kids to and from, being school and dance and scouts, and things like that. And so when I made the schedule and wrote it down and looked at it, I thought, yeah, this is not going to fly. When I go down there, they are not going to sign off on this. And I just felt ridiculous doing it. But I did. And man, when I went down there, showed up, that first day I went in, I felt like a 12-year-old little boy, man. I was walking in there. I felt like I was, 4 foot 2 inches tall. I was scared to death of what we were going to do down there. When I got there, obviously they went through all these formalities, man. They took pictures of me, fingerprints, a baseline urinalysis, which was clean. And because I had been sober for a little bit, and sat down waiting for the correction officer that I was assigned to take care of me. So he handed me a sheet of paper and had me, to schedule, write out my schedule, the things I was asking permission to do, what I did. It had room for 3 things on it, I think, if I remember right. And I kind of looked up and was like, yeah, that's not going to work. So I didn't, I didn't want to do it, but my sponsor coached me. So I got my piece of paper out and I said, well, the thing is, I'm going to a lot of recovery meetings, and I work, and my son, daughter have activities. So I handed him the piece of paper, and he looked down his reading glasses, down his nose at that piece of paper, and up at me, and down at the paper, and up at me. And he reached over and said, he put a finger up in there and said, give me just a minute, I'm going to need to call Janine. And he reached over and he grabbed the phone. He said, Janine, Mr. Reed is here, and we need to speak with you. I had no idea who Janine was. So we sat quietly. He hung up the phone, and he sat there, and I sat there, and we just sat quietly. And I could hear the footsteps come around the corner, and boom, 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 around the corner, and there walks around, comes around the corner is, I'll just say it, attractive, petite, blonde lady, with fantastic energy, come around the corner and introduced herself as Janine. And I started stumbling around and telling her what was going on, and Jim did too. And she looked at my paper and she gave me asked me a number of questions. And after getting satisfied that all was well, she told Jim to let me do all that stuff. And that was the very first time that there's a sign down there that said something about reducing recidivism. I think is what they call it. Recidivism, something, which means going back and getting in trouble again. And I really didn't buy that when I was down there. That's not been, I didn't think that's what the court system or the correction system actually did. I thought they were there to punish you, not to help you get better. But as time went by, I found out that actually they were down there to help me get better. So I tried to squeeze in all my stuff. That piece of paper that Jim had given me was like a carbon copy paper. So when you wrote on it, it transferred to the pieces underneath of it. And I tried to squeeze all my stuff on there, and I did the best I could. And after a minute, and so we got that done and settled it. And after a few weeks, I realized, so I started I took that piece of paper, that form, and I made my own on Excel. And filled it out. And plus that way I could really just tune it up. It was the same week to week to week to week. So I could just change the dates and stuff and do it. And I took it down there and asked them if that would suffice. And they looked at it and they were totally cool with it. I mean, it looked like their form. It was neat, typed up. So it wasn't handwritten, all the addresses, all the information was on it. And it actually turned out that later on they asked me for a copy of it because they wondered if maybe other, I was saying this in air quotes because this is what they called it, other clients. I felt more like a inmate than a client would use that schedule. Now I don't know if they ever did, but so week after week I would start doing that. Another thing I did, you had to you had to get paper signed. I had to get meeting sheets signed. They gave me a meeting sheet format, so every time I went to a meeting, a 12-step meeting, I'd fill that out and get it signed. You had to bring them back in every Friday, or that was my day. Come back every Friday, turn in a new schedule, and turn in all your verifications for the past week. So like when I took Dustin to Scouts, I would have to get the Scoutmaster to sign that I was there. And when I went to dance, I'd have to get the lady at the dance place to sign that I had actually been there. And anything else I did, I had an opportunity to go to the grocery store once a week, and I had to turn in my receipt, and the time window needed to be when I said I was going to be at the grocery store. I was able to go to Mom and Dad's, but I don't remember having to have any verification for that. I was going to church, so I turned in a copy of the church bulletin, and I also turned in my timesheets and my paycheck stubs because they said, they didn't need to not let work know about it as long as work was still paying me, and then they would assume I was there. Now, my ankle bracelet was not a GPS or cell kind of one. It was one where they actually like a radio frequency, so they had to come find me to see if I was actually someplace. So they had some kind of device, and they could drive by and see if my ankle bracelet was in that building or if I was in the places I said I was going to be. And there was a couple times when I was in a basement when somebody would call me, the guy who was out doing the surveillance would call me and ask me, where you at? And I'd tell him. And because they couldn't pick me up in a basement or in the middle of a big building like at work. But they didn't worry about it too much. One of the things I was always worried about is I was worried I'd screw that up by accident. I knew I wasn't going to make a mistake on purpose. I just wasn't going to risk that and end up facing those consequences of all that prison time. Because that's what I thought. I thought that if I screwed that up, I was going to prison. It turned out, and I'll tell that story in a minute, it turned out that wasn't necessarily true. It's actually a great thing for me that I didn't know that. Along with, so that ankle bracelet had that radio frequency thing. They'd run around and find me. And I don't know how much they did that, but they did a little. I do remember right off the bat. So I also had a breathalyzer in my house that would ring. It had a tone that went off on it, and it would call for me, and I'd have to run up and blow in it. When I first came home, from work, when I first came through the door, it would know because it would pick up and sense my ankle bracelet, and it would call for me. And it would get me first thing in the morning, and it would get me last thing in the night. And I've shared before, one time it actually got me on a Sunday. It called for me 7 times. That was the record I could remember how many times one day it actually asked me to come up and blow in it for 7 times. It also tracked me, so it knew what time I was coming and leaving the house. So when it lost contact with my ankle bracelet, it logged that. When I came back home, it logged that. So right off the bat, when I first had it, my only landline came in upstairs in my house. So that's what they hooked it to. Well, I wasn't going to be able to hear that thing all over the house. I didn't think I'd be able to. So I had somebody get me a baby monitor. And I put a baby monitor up there by it, and I kept the other hand, like the handheld part of the baby monitor, near me. Or on my belt even. So that I would hear it. If I was sitting down in the basement or wherever I was sitting, I'd have it sitting there on the table so that I could hear it go off, and I'd run up and blow into it. And when I come home from work, I didn't really have time when I come in the house, I didn't have time to like get my bags or get my stuff or unload the car, or even when I come home from the grocery store to unload the car, I'd have to, basically when it heard me, because it would probably catch me likewise. I was approaching the house and was still in the street, and it would alarm it. And then, so I had very little time to get in the house and get, blow in it so that I could, satisfy it and go on to doing what I was doing. And I was down in the basement running a power saw or something, and I didn't hear it going off, but I did hear the very last tone. Now, the very last tone is a little different than the rest of them. And I come upstairs and I missed it, and I'm sitting there staring at that breathalyzer, man. And it's the very first time, and heck, man, I went out and stood by the front door, watching out the front door, because I thought sure that they were going to be coming after me in just a minute. And they didn't. And I went to my next verification appointment to take my stuff in there, and I asked him about it, and he saw it and looked at it, and he just kind of shook his head, and he said, yeah, man, if there's any problem, we will call you. And I thought, okay, so, that's interesting. I'm not getting in trouble for not blowing in that machine. But I wasn't going to let that happen. That's not going to happen on purpose. So that thing would call for me. I'd blow on it. My kids and other people around, we call it the bat phone. It was highly annoying, but it would take your picture. It had flashes around it. Another thing it would do, like, it tended to get me in my morning meditation almost every single morning. It actually taught me a lot about, like, being interrupted during your meditation. In the beginning, when it would go off, I would think, well, that screwed that up. No sense in trying to continue to meditate. But there was also something in me that didn't want to accept that. So I learned to go back downstairs and sit down, and after blowing in the machine, come back down, chill out, and get back in and finish my meditation. So, and part of that is, part of the fundamental thing of meditation is to be cool when all those around you are not, right? When then chaos is around you, meditation practice helps you maintain some serenity. So it taught me that. Think about what else happened. There was a whole bunch of stuff, there was a day that on Fridays I would leave the house and go take my kids to Silver Creek it's about 30 minute way to school, and then head down to community corrections to turn in my stuff and get my weekly check-in. And I walked one day, and the guy, my main corrections guy, he asked me what time it was on my watch, and I told him, and he said, good. So he said, here, look here. And he showed me, and he said, you left the house early this morning. Well, instantly my blood pressure goes up, and I'm panicked because I think I'm in trouble. And I look over there, and he's pointing at it on the screen, and I had left the house, and I signed out, signed my thing, said I'd leave the house at 7:30. And I'd left the house 90 seconds early. So it said something like 7:28:32. And I thought he might be going to crack a smile in a minute and let me know he was joking, but he did not. He was serious, best I could tell. And so he jerked a knot in my tail for leaving the house 90 seconds early that day, and if I would watch my watch that I had on, that I would be in sync with the computer, and I would know whether if I was leaving earlier or, that I would be on time. A number of different times those things happen, and I kind of understand that, man, because you give us a long leash, and we'll take every inch of it, right? There was another time when Dustin was going to scout camp was coming up, and I only had that one grocery store trip a week, and I could schedule some other things if I wanted to go clothes shopping or if I need to do something I need to schedule it, but I didn't, and it got time, and Dustin needed some socks. So rather than go to Kroger's and then run and get some socks or do something else about that, I did my grocery store trip at Myers. Because Kroger's does not have socks, or at least the one down the street from me does not, and Myers has groceries and socks. And sometimes I would put on my schedule that I was going to Myers instead of Kroger's. This week, though, I had said I was going to Kroger's. I went to Myers, and I got the socks, and I come home. Well, the next week, I went to do my verifications, and my normal people weren't there. And one of the more upper-ranking persons at the community corrections was doing the check-ins, and the very first thing she did, man, so normally they didn't like look at my stuff. They just kind of fingered through it and moved on. She started actually doing a true verification, and the first thing she stepped on was my schedule said I was going to be at Kroger's, and I had a Myers receipt. So she read me the riot act. Once again, I thought I was in a ton of trouble. She called in somebody else because she was not going to do a detailed analysis of my verifications versus my schedule, and she got him to do it, and he kind of he kind of snickered under his breath a little bit about that's just her, and you can't be doing this, dude. And it ended up getting padded out, and it wasn't any big deal, but it certainly had me freaked out for a minute, and I knew I shouldn't have done it. That was the only time that I remember actually pushing the limit beyond where I knew, I was like, but I don't know, that's just, I guess, in my nature at some level. It's surprising that I didn't do it more than that. I remember one time I was in church, and this was early on too. I was in church, and my phone rang, and I saw that it was community corrections, and I was in the middle, man, and I mean right in the middle. And there was probably a dozen people down each aisle from me, and I couldn't just, excuse me. And it was like, this church has traditional, I think they call it, services, where there's basically a rock band is playing up on stage in the beginning. And I answered the phone, man, and I told him, I was like, he goes, "Where are you at?" I said, "I'm at church." And I said, "I know it doesn't sound like church. It sounds like I'm in a concert." And I told him, and he's actually was familiar with it. So he said, "Well, when you get out, call me back." And what I'd done, I bumped that breathalyzer. Also had like a tilt in it, like a pinball machine used to have a tilt indicator. So if you bumped that damn thing, man, it set off a tamper deal. So I started having to learn to not. So that's what had happened that morning, is I bumped the table, and he was calling about the tamper alert. And so I had to be really careful not to bump into that thing, man. It had that flash in it, and would take your picture, and you had to blow in it, and probably my cheeks, you look like was it Dizzy Gillespie or Louis Armstrong or somebody who blew the saxophone with their cheeks all out. You had to blow in that sucker hard, just like you do. In case y'all don't know, those ones you have to do out on the road, man. Blow hard, harder. Excuse me. And so I started having those pictures. I went through a period of time where I was I had a bunch of hats up there, and I would put on a different hat every time, which I thought was a little bit humorous, but they didn't seem to give two shakes about it. I never heard one word about my hat escapades while I was going down there. It was a trip, started getting comfortable with that ankle bracelet. I made so many goofy mistakes. There was one of the times, and here's one of the things where I never knew the rules, and I thought that if I just screwed up one time, man, that they would be taking me right straight to prison. That was what my head had told me. And I went down one time, and there was a gal working it, and again, my normal people were not available, and I was checking in with somebody I had not checked in with before. No big deal, really. But she asked me, she looked at my schedule, and she looked at this, and she said, "How come you're only going to your parents for 1 hour on Sunday?" And I said, well, that's what they told me I could do. And she goes, oh no. She said, how long have you been? And she looked it up. She goes, you've been on the program for 90 days now. And she said, you can do it for 2 hours now. And I just kind of laughed, and I was like, well, you know what's actually, and this has been the way that this really has been happening, is that I didn't know what I could do and what I couldn't do until I did it or didn't do it, and then they would correct me. So I didn't have the rules. And so she opens this drawer up and slides it open, and she goes, they didn't give you one of these? And across the front of this notebook, this set of papers it said HIP Participant Guidelines. And I just smiled and laughed at her, and I was like, nope, they did not give me one of those. And she kind of looked at me, and her eyes got big, and she goes, oh. And she just held eye contact with me. She didn't even look down the drawer. She held the eye contact with me. She slid the paper back in the drawer and shut it. And she said, okay, well, we will talk to, I will talk to somebody about that. And I thought, the look she gave me was, what in the world is going on with this dude that they didn't even give him the rule book? But, so I'm 90 days down the road, and I've gotten gotten a fair, decent little foundation under my feet. And I wasn't, in dire straits anymore. And they gave me the rule book, and the rule book let me know that I could have actually failed some of those breathalyzer tests, like 3 of them before getting in trouble, and some other kind of informations like that had I known earlier, may not have been good for me. So I always do chalk those things up to that higher power doing for me what I could not do for myself. I got used to wearing it. I'd be in the office, and work never did know that I never did have to tell them. I don't work there anymore. It's kind of something I can kind of be a little bit more free to talk about today, and I think I'd be free to talk about that anyway. But they never did. I never had to tell them, and I traveled a lot for work, and never did end up, one of my worst fears is that I'd get asked to travel, and I had an ankle bracelet on, and I wouldn't be able to, and I'd have to tell them, and I just had this mental picture of them asking me why I couldn't travel, and me picking up my pants leg and showing them my ankle bracelet. I never had to do that. I never got asked to travel that entire time while I was on home incarceration. But I do remember a time or two where I'd be sitting in these horseshoe-shaped, these conference rooms with these horseshoe-shaped tables in them, so everybody could kind of look at each other, and somebody like glancing down like at my ankle, and with scrunching up their eyebrows, like, what the hell is on that dude's ankle? And that happened a couple of times, and there was actually one time where my sponsor would call me at about 2:00 in the afternoon most days when he got off work, and it would always be, it's kind of like a Saved by the Bell thing. I'd be in the middle of a conversation I didn't really want to be in with people at work, and I could say, oh, got to take this call. And one day I was standing there for whatever reason, because I just joke and cut up stuff. I said, oh, that's my probation officer. I got to take this call. And I walked off. And a little while later, the guy come up, and one of the guys that was standing there talking, he come up to me, and he goes, yeah, you was acting like you was joking, but you was serious, wasn't you? And he pointed at my ankle, and he said, I've seen it before. And so a few people at work caught on to it, but it never did cause any issue. I guess I'll further down that trail a little bit is that not having to travel for that time. And then, I got off. They told me a couple of weeks before that 9 months was up that I was probably going to get off and go on day reporting, where I would need to call Janine every day, and they were going to take the ankle bracelet off of me, and I was going to actually get a break because of my good behavior. And they could also see that I'd, in the first 5 months or something, I'd worked the steps and I'd gotten free entirely. My spirit had gotten free. They saw that, and that was one of the things about Janine, and she could tell that was happening with me. And I'll tell some of this story from my perspective, and I don't think she would mind at all. She means a great deal to me. And so as I go down this path, I'll probably talk about some of that. So I ended up on a day reporting, and that's like when I was down there at deer camp for that 2 weeks right after getting off of it. I would have to come up top of the hill, and I had to call her every day, which wasn't any big deal because I was going to 12-step meetings in the evenings, and I could contact her either by text or voicemail. And as long as I made the contact with her and could be contacted, it was not a big deal. And that was actually cool because I had a list of meetings and stuff, and I would get up and get out of there. And the very first night I went to a meeting that was in a book, because it was in a different district, and I went and it was dark and I couldn't find it, and I was like bummed because I couldn't find a meeting, and I've been used to going to meetings every week or every night, and but I missed it and I couldn't find it, so I went on back to the cabin and I tried again the next night. Well, the next night I found a meeting, in another location, and these things are like sometimes 20 miles apart from one another, but it's the same guys at the same meetings 20 miles apart from each other out there in the country. It's not like here in town. And once I found a meeting, I could ask and get the skinny on everything, and so then I got the idea, and those guys told me where all the active meetings were at, and I still have those. And before deer season, usually I'll contact somebody to make sure that the meetings are where they're at, so that I don't end up missing them again, because every year I do that and the guys remember me, and that's kind of cool, because I got this little group of people down there that country folks out in rural Indiana, where around deer season every year I go visit them in some meetings. So back to the travel thing. So then I was on another year of probation, and although the travel restrictions were not so strict as they were when I was on the home incarceration, I was still afraid to travel, and I knew there'd be some hoops to jump through. And at one point I ended up getting asked to be, and let me think about the timeline. So then that was almost all 2015 that I was in on home incarceration. It was 2016. So towards the end of September of 2016, work notified me that I've been selected to be on this team, this research and development team, to work on some new technology. And in that, it was in cahoots with a company in Japan, and we were going to need to travel over and get trained, and that was going to happen in September. And so I went down and talked to my probation officer about that, and she said, yeah, if you're going to, I still remember, she goes, if you were going to Alabama or Connecticut or someplace like that, I would imagine that's going to be feasible. But she said, I don't think the judge is going to let you leave the country. But if that's the deal, we will contact the judge and we'll fill out the paperwork and we'll see if we can get that done. But she said, she wasn't very optimistic about that happening. So the September trip, of course, I'm anxious about it. My sponsor is always telling me pray to my higher power, support my recovery, whatever that means, and I continue to do that today. So I sit and I watched it tick out, and the meeting, the trip moved out to October, and then October come around and we're not going to do it. And I've moved away from my people. So I've been moved into a special little group that's working on this team where we're all potted up together. And the meeting, I keep on saying that. The trip to Japan moved from September, nope, October, nope, November, nope. And it just kept on getting bumped out and out. And then, of course, when it got to be around the holidays, nobody wanted to travel then. So then they moved it out to January. And then it didn't happen in January. So I kept on doing all these. A lot of times I just kept my mouth shut because it started moving. And until it actually became something real, I wasn't going to bother my probation officer with it. But I got pushed out. So on February the 18th of 2017, they took off my ankle brace, I signed the papers and finished the probation. Not the ankle bracelet, the probation. So I finalized that, signed off, was released from probation, and 11 days later, on February the 29th, I was on an airplane to Japan. So we got there, man, and I'm standing up on a mountain. The very first Friday night, man, there's a gondola car took you up on top of this mountain. I can't remember what the name of it is now, but Nagasaki, Japan has one of the top 3, I think, nightscapes in the country, ranked by somebody. And I think Monaco and Hong Kong are the other 2 or something like that. So I'm standing up on this mountain where this gondola car took up while I'm watching as the sun sets behind me over the Japanese Ocean. And I'm looking down at the port of Nagasaki as the lights are changing from dark to the lights down there. Almost look like the sky, almost look like twinkling stars down there, thinking, my goodness, man, here I am on the other side of the world watching watching the sunset over the Japanese Ocean, looking down on Nagasaki, Japan, when just a couple weeks ago I needed to have a judge's approval to leave the county. That's big stuff for this dude. I cried on that top of that hill, and I had a great time in Japan, and it was somewhat of a spiritual mecca. One day we took off. It was a Saturday morning after this thing, and after the Friday night, we were up on top of the mountain watching the sunset and everything. The next day, I woke up early, and I had a plot planned, and I headed on the trolley cars. They had the old trolley cars with the overhead wires, and I went to the very furthest southern tip of Nagasaki and started down there because there was a Confucian temple down there, and I went down there and sat and meditated in that Confucian temple and made a little offering at the altar, and slowly made my way through the entire day from southern end of Nagasaki all the way up through, and I stopped at gardens and for a while another fella from work was with me. He just was like kind of tagging along, and I said sure. I wasn't really cool with that in the beginning. I kind of want to do this by myself, but he didn't want to tell him no. So we got to know each other pretty well during that trip and that day, but he bailed on the middle of the day, which was fine. I don't mean bail in a negative term, but when we were coming up north from the southern end, when we come back by the trolley stop that was nearest to the hotel, he went on ahead and went back to the hotel. And I kept on going, visiting temples and gardens and other points of interest. And up in the northern end of Nagasaki was the ground zero where the bombs were dropped. And when we got up there, there was a heaviness up around that area. One of the things was as I looked around, there was a lot of Japanese people, and here's this tall white American, obvious American, that is standing there watching this stuff. And there's there's a corner of a church that's still standing, just the very corner. And there's the Nagasaki Museum. It had some just brutal pictures of the damage and the people that experienced that. Just terribly heavy, man. And I spent the afternoon up there. I was journaling. I have a journal out on the net from the whole experience and pictures too from that trip to the whole week. We were there. We were there 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember. But the highlight of the day was I knew that I had found that there was an AA meeting up that end of town at the end of the day. So as it started getting to be evening, being time to do that, I started strolling that direction, stopped and bought some street food and an ice cream cone. I remember that. And started heading up that way. And I found a church and wasn't sure if I was in the right place for sure, but it looked like any old Western church, looked like any old church you'd see here in New Albany or any place else. And I kind of looked around for a minute, and I saw a guy kind of, 1 foot up on a stool, kind of elbow on his knee, smoking a cigarette. And he looked like my kind of guy. And right beyond him was a door that had the circle and a triangle hanging on the door, and it said AA inside of that. So I walked up to him slowly and said AA, and he got big eyes and looked at me and like stubbed out a cigarette real quick and waved me to come his direction. And we went, and he opened the door and showed me, had a motion for me to take off my shoes and to put on some sandals that were down there. There was like some, my big size 12 foot. And I think the sandals were like a size 6 or something. And so he allowed me to go first, right? And he shuffled me ahead, and kind of, very, I don't know if the word is subservient, submissive, something like that, but very, very, darn, the word is slipping me. But I think you get the point. So he shows me into the room, and as I walk into the room, everybody's eyes get real big because they're looking at me like a wrong room, dude. I'm smiling, and the guy comes in behind me, and he's rattling off machine gun fire, Japanese, blah, 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 blah. And I seen him, and I bet he's going, oh, it's okay. He's one of us. And as the smile started coming around the room, and people shook my hand, and we did our best at some introductions. There was one guy there that spoke a bit of English. His name was Sly. He had the juice. He also had some kind of cough. I think he must have had lung cancer or something going on because he was coughing and spitting into a cup. He was not in good shape, but you could see the twinkle in his eyes. Spiritually, he was in good shape. His physical body was not. We sat around in that meeting, and those guys started reading, just like we do in any meeting. And I started realizing the cadence, and I was relatively sure they were reading How It Works. And I'm kind of following along in my big book of How It Works. And, I'm just trying to be respectful and follow along and doing, having my own meeting and amongst their meeting. And they got to the point where it says, our adventures before and after made clear 3 pertinent ideas. And the guy said A. And my finger was right there. My eyes were right there in my book, and chills went up my spine as he said A, that no human power could release our alcoholism. B, and damn, I've lost it. But C, and God could and would if he were sought. And everybody chanted that part together. And I was like, wow, how cool is that, man? I was following right along. So they'd go around the room and they'd just start sharing from one around the room. And, I can't understand a single word they're saying. It goes around the room and this person shares, that person shares, but I kind of get the gist of it. You could feel the flavor. Somebody was a newcomer and you could tell that she is having some issues, and she had a paper to be signed. So you could see that, which was interesting, is that they're having, get court paper signed in Japan to go to an AA meeting. And as it come around to me, the guy to my left looked at me and he said speech, which I think he just meant, your turn to share. So I shared, and I told them what I was going on, and they all looked at me, and they were intently engaged while I spoke. And I would guess they probably knew a little English. Obviously I knew no Japanese, and they couldn't speak any English except for Sly. Maybe a couple other people had a little bit of English. And we went around the room, and we finished that meeting and closed it, and I couldn't understand a word they said, and they couldn't understand a word I said, and it didn't make a fucking bit of difference, man. And I tear up thinking about it right now. Because there I was in that faraway land, and once again, man, just a few weeks before, I had to get permission from a judge to leave the county. There I was on the other side of the world sitting in an AA meeting, and I offered a guy that Sly my big book, but he wouldn't take it because he didn't have something of equal value to trade. But he did have like a meeting in a pocket kind of book, and it's like half of 8 and half by 11 book, and it has the 12 traditions, how it works, the 12 steps, some other things, some promises, some other meeting staples in it. And he signed it and put his telephone number in there. And I had a little AA meeting in a pocketbook too, kind of thing. And I signed mine and put my telephone number in mine, and we traded that because that was an equal trade, right? And I still have that. And goddamn, man, I was so juiced up after that meeting. I jumped on that trolley car, man, and headed back south, and the sun was setting. It was evening, and headed back down to the hotel. And as I'm cruising past that stop where the mountain was, the guy that had been with me earlier in the day jumped on the trolley car, man, and he walked right up to me and sat beside me and had no idea it was me. I had to say his name. It was interesting that he didn't pick up on that was me sitting there. Anyway, it just totally juiced me up, and that whole day was just it was just a magical day. I tried to get up on Sunday and repeat it because it was like one of those things that, I want this day over and over and over again, like a Groundhog Day thing. But that was not to be. The next day it was cold and rainy. The first day it was 70 degrees and sunny. It was just awesome. But the next day it wasn't, and I couldn't recreate it again. And time ticked out, and we come back home from Japan, and ultimately that ended up being something that ended up, that being moved to that other team. Meanwhile, while I moved to that other team, the company had changed software, so CAD software, and that's why I was basically a draftsman all in all. And ended up being that while I went over on the special teams, all my guys got trained on the new stuff, or all my, my cohorts or whatever got trained on the new stuff. And when I came back, I never could really catch up, and I didn't have any desire to either. After that, I going over and working in that other department and doing that, it swept all my drive from me from continuing to want to work there. It became a real chore to get up in the mornings and be there, but that's a whole nother story. I don't want to go down that pike. Every week with Janine, I'd go turn in my verifications and all that kind of stuff, and then I'd go over and sit with her for a little bit. She's more like a social worker kind of type. where she was checking on my well-being and seeing how, if I was doing okay. And we hit it off really quickly. And she's just a really easy lady to be with and talk to. And she showed genuine interest in me getting better. And frankly, I'm a pretty personal person too. And so we talked and got to know each other. And every week on my weekend visit, we would sit there and talk to them, and we'd have our conversation. And it was fun. And she was interested in my recovery. She was truly interested in it. And she was watching me. She was watching me change, and she saw that. And on one particular visit, man, I was sitting there, man, the energy had shifted completely. There was something else going on, man, and I could see that she was really, really down. And I asked her, I was like, "What's going on with you?" And she broke down, man, and through some sobs and some real pain. She had told me that her husband had been diagnosed with advanced colon cancer. And from that day forward, man, our visits became something where we shared each other's lives with one another, and we became friends. And she would talk about her things, and I would talk about mine. And that moved me, and it still does. She's a friend of mine today. She actually found out I was telling her about going to a meditation workshop. It was on Saturdays, all 1 month, 4 Saturdays in a row. And she asked if she could go, and she attended that meditation workshop with me. She's attended my sobriety celebrations, my birthdays. She stayed in contact with each other, at some level ever since, Facebook friends, whatnot. So 4 years after meeting her, she reached out to me and told me that her husband had passed away from that cancer. Made it 4 years. And man, some lady used to basically be my corrections officer. Took time out of her day to call me in one of life's most difficult times to let me know that that had happened. Don't tell me what can and can't happen in recovery. Don't begin to say it can't happen for you. My miracle list is deep, man. It reminds me, we're supposed to have lunch. I need to arrange that. Well, about an hour of podcast here. That story kind of took some of the wind out of my sails, and not in a bad way. It just touched me and wondered about. Made me think. I have an accountability issue I need to clean up, because I talked about doing something with her sometime and doing lunch, and I let that get by and didn't do it. That's okay. We can make things right today. So, a week away from my 50th birthday, doing this handyman gig, digging that. Getting ready to go on a really neat vacation. Some other things are changing. Some things are shifting. Looking forward to hunting season's just around the corner. Here we are. What is it? August the 17th today. So just a couple of days ago, squirrel season started. I was sharing about that the other day. I remember coming home from school and Dad had a shotgun in the car, and we'd take off and go down. Actually, down a lot of times we go to where Fargo, what is now Fargo, and go squirrel hunting on August the 15th after school. It's something I always love to do, man. It's a buggy, spider webs, but it didn't matter to me, man. I always loved doing that, and I kind of missed it today too. And this weekend thought about going and looking for a squirrel this afternoon or this morning when I was walking around. I heard something moving around in the trees, but don't really have any desire to kill them or clean them anymore, but that's still in me. And what squirrel season means is deer season is just around the corner, so it's time to start getting started on that. Tractor's running again, so I'm going to try to see if I can get food plots back out there. We got a lot of firewood drug up. We are completely out of firewood, so we're going to have a firewood cutting party and get that done. Not having a fall retreat again this year. Maybe I'll resurrect that sometime. Probably will have a recovery deer hunt sometime over the fall. That was cool last year. That was one of the podcasts was from deer camp. That needs to be another. I think that needs to be a annual event. Enjoy the shit out of that. It'll get around. Everybody will want to come, but it's hard to hunt everybody. We got a lot of acres and stuff, but it's hard to hunt everybody. Of course, some people could. There's room for some people just to hang out and not go hunting. As a guide kind of guy. Of course, the guys that were there last year, they started knowing where they're going, and they'd be able to be a little more self-sufficient. Last year, I had to, I get to help them find spots to hunt and that kind of thing. Be cool to do it earlier in the season, though. Maybe I can do that too. We did it muzzleloader season last year. There's some reasons around that I won't go into here, but it'd be nice if we did it a little earlier in the season. A couple of us bow hunt. I just primarily bow hunt, so and of course I bow hunt. I don't do anything more. I haven't killed anything since 2000. I haven't killed a deer since 2000. Killed a turkey in 12 with my longbow. Man, something slipped my mind on the whole home incarceration thing that I was going to touch on, and it got away from me. Yeah, I don't remember. It's out of context now. It don't matter. So, I want to talk about for just a minute. Nicotine recovery. It's something else I've been putting in on the Spiritual Underground podcast, and it's something that's been a big piece of my recovery. And I know that I look around, I got a lot of nicotine using friends in my inner circle. Actually, I think they know that it's not a knock or it's not any kind of dig on them. I hope it also gets under their craw a little bit about wanting to quit. One of them in particular, I'll just say it. I'll put him on the hook. Marshall, who's coming tomorrow, has already talked to me about nicotine being the next thing he wants to tackle. And we have a nicotine quitting community and a little part of a little group that's doing that. So people want to do that. It's a little odd, it's a little funny, but so is coming in and investing yourself into 12 steps. It feels completely unnatural at first, right? And same thing when I invested myself in a nicotine quitting community. It felt very unnatural at first, but it come around and now it's and we might have run one guy off. We had a guy come in, he wanted to quit nicotine, and he come around, he hung around for a few days, and I remember one day he asked us how old we were. I'll take that as a compliment, man, because I'm almost 50, and if I'm getting looked at as younger than then that's okay with me. That could be looked at as maybe I'm a bit adolescent, and again, okay, so what? But the nicotine quitting thing, man, it's another drug, and I didn't realize how much it actually had its claws in me at the level that it did. It's the other thing, you get used to it, and nicotine's one that, your body begins to just be used to, so you can't, you have no idea. You think it's really not doing anything to you, but come off of that shit, man. When you come off of it, it will wig you. I mean, my ass was on fire when I quit the dope and the alcohol, so there's some stuff going on. There really was no real crisis going on when I quit nicotine. Sometimes some people have some health issues or something that will cause them to need to do that. So they'll have that desperation that some of that drugs and alcohol usually give us. But man, you stop it, and you'll definitely know what it does to you. You think it doesn't. You think it doesn't have its hooks in you. The rage that I had was phenomenal. I've been thinking about resurrecting some of and I might see if I can do that, like migrate some of those nicotine quitting videos over to the Spiritual Underground podcast. They're out on YouTube right now under a channel called Doggone Hunt. Just like it sounds, Doggone Hunt. And heck, there's 100 something on there. of just short YouTube videos about on nicotine quitting. Some of them have actual content. Some of them are, some of them is a cabin tour. Some of them are comedy. Most of them have some humorous element. I tried to interject that most of the time. So anyway, check that out, man. And I'm going to continue to do this nicotine quitting thing. And I'm going to continue to release these things. These Jim is doing these PQAs. So they're public quit announcements. And they're giving you information about quitting nicotine. And, man, we just continue to do things to improve the, quote Bob Earl, continue to do things that improve the quality of my life in recovery. And that means in recovery from whatever, man. I'm in recovery from nicotine addiction also. The other day I was driving and had a particularly stressful event, and I wanted a cigarette. And I haven't smoked. I stopped smoking cigarettes in 2003. I had a little stint in rehab in 2013 or something like that. I can't really remember when that was, and I picked up some cigarettes and started smoking again for just like a month or so, and then I started vaping after that. I was like, man, I'm not digging these cigarettes, and I stopped that and started vaping. And I can't remember. I think it's 14 maybe. But anyway, here, some 5 years later, I'm driving down the road and craving a cigarette out of the blue. Like I was sitting with Brandon last night and that fist step, and he's dipping, and he's not dipping the brand I like, but he's dipping, man. And I'm looking over it, and a couple times, thinking, because I kind of miss dipping, man, when you're sitting around and not really doing anything else. It just seems like something to do. What I find myself doing today instead is eating. So, nicotine quitting, PQAs. Good to continue to do some nicotine quitting podcasts. I got some other guests lined up. It's one of the cool things about this particular format. I look on some of my friends' podcasts and are looking for guests all the time. And I have right now, it appears that I have an infinite number of guests to interview and have on the show. And next Sunday, we got a big time guest coming into DTM Studios to share his story, and I'm too excited about that. So we got Mark, Marshall, and I'll just keep listening to myself for the time being. But and we got this one coming in next after I get home from vacation next Sunday, and you're gonna like that. So I'm having a blast quitting with you. If you're not having fun in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. Thank each and every one of you for allowing me to participate in my recovery in this manner and many other unique ways that I get to do this thing and quit. And quit, stay sober. What we say, quit, clean, and sober. What we'll do this too. Tomorrow actually I will be sober 1,700 days tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, today is 1,699 days sober. 669 days off of the nicotine. And today is the 77th day of the 100 handstands of summer that we're doing, a little promotional thing with 502 Power Yoga. So my little thing I send out every day, like today says 1699/69/77. Something's gotten goofed up there though. Something ain't right. Yeah, look, I did. I bumped it. It is not 1,700 today. Today is 1,690. I just fat thumbed it. No big deal. Don't have to be perfect today. I can correct that easy enough. Thank y'all. Keep on listening. Feedback. spiritualunderground.org. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery at Amazon by James Christopher Cone. Music around this is by Darren Frank. Let's continue to improve the quality of our lives, folks. Be a better version of us today than we were yesterday. Peace out.
Greetings, folks. This is the Colonel. You may remember me from episode 126 about nicotine recovery. Well, I'm here with this week's public quit announcement for those of you wishing to add nicotine to your recovery roster. This PQA is brought to you by DTM Woodworking and Handy Dan Services. Today I want to talk about something extremely important for everyone just starting out, and to those of you with some quit time already under your belts. It's called a quit plan. i.e. what are you going to do when the cravings are just too much, or you're caught off guard when a friend lights a cigarette next to you, or cracks open a fresh can of Copenhagen just upwind of you. That shit sucks. So how you react to it is what we call a quit plan. This battle drill should include having and using the numbers to your quit brothers that can talk you off the ledge, or having a pocket full of your hard candy of choice. My plan was always to have Dan, along with a dozen other members, on speed dial, and to never ever leave my house without a pocket full of cherry-flavored Hall's cough drops. It's also generally recommended that you avoid bars or alcohol consumption early on for those of you not already walking that recovery path. Other steps may include avoiding convenience stores or gas stations, and even politely staying away from certain folks early in your quit who tend to trigger those really bad cravings. Everyone's plan is different in subtle ways because of the nature of their own addictions. So sit down and take inventory of your addictive behaviors, your triggers, and your past performance in recovery. Then develop a plan specific to your own needs. Modify them as you learn what works best for you and about your own addiction. Well, my friends, this has been your PQA for the week. Take it from Dan and I. It all gets better. And you only need to worry about staying quit today, one day at a time. Quit on and carry on, my friends. Colonel No Cup out.
All alone at night, staring out my window, watching the rain fall, listen to the wind blow. I like to tell you exactly what I've been through, but it's so painful it's hard to get into. Every day it seems like it's something else. I don't know why I try to fool myself. Keep believing there's something I can do. Maybe someday I will break through. Maybe someday I will break through. At the stoplight, screaming at the masses, pedal to the floor, hurry up and pass them. It's not the people that make me want to scream, it's your memory tugging at my heartstrings. Every day it seems like it's something else. I don't know why I try to fool myself. Keep believing there's something I can do. Maybe someday I will break through. Maybe someday I will break through. Such a cold word, I like to turn the heat up, but I'm a frightened child afraid of getting beat up. So I hide away, locked up in my safe zone, but I still feel the chill and it cuts me to the bone. Every day it seems like it's something else. I don't know why I try to fool myself. Keep believing there's something I can do. Maybe someday I will break through. Maybe someday